In your iPhone right now, 32 rare earth elements. In a Tesla Model 3, 12 kilograms. In every wind turbine, 450 kilograms. Ask where these materials come from, and you'll hear the same number repeated everywhere. China controls 98% of global production. Here's what that number actually means, and what it deliberately obscures. This isn't a conspiracy. It's something more interesting. An entire industry worth hundreds of billions, where China inflates its monopoly, America inflates its independence, and green tech companies selectively report environmental costs. The result? A supply chain built on strategic ambiguity, where the numbers you hear depend on who's presenting them and why. By the end of this video, you'll understand how the rare earth industry actually works and why straightforward answers are so hard to find. Let's start with that 98% figure. According to the U.S. Geological Survey and most Western sources, China controls 98% of rare earth production. That number appears in news articles, government briefings, university lectures, but China's own Ministry of Industry and Information Technology reports they account for 70 to 75% of refined production. Independent mining analysts at Benchmark Mineral Intelligence estimate 85% when including unreported processing. So which is it? The answer reveals how strategic ambiguity works. China doesn't mine 98% of rare earth ore, closer to 60 to 70%, but they do control approximately 85 to 90% of refining capacity, the crucial step that turns ore into usable materials. The 98% figure conflates mining and refining. It's not technically false, just carefully imprecise. Why does this ambiguity persist? Because it serves multiple interests. China projects maximum leverage. Western governments justify defense spending on rare earth independence. Media outlets get a dramatic headline. According to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence's 2024 analysis, approximately 15 to 18% of rare earth mining occurs outside China, in Australia, the US, Myanmar, and African nations. But nearly all that ore gets shipped to China for processing. The distinction matters. Mining is relatively straightforward. Refining is the bottleneck. In 2010, China briefly restricted rare earth exports to Japan during a territorial dispute over the Senkaku Islands. According to Financial Times and Wall Street Journal reporting, the restriction lasted only weeks, but global supply chains panicked. China learned something valuable. Perceived monopoly creates leverage even when actual control is partial. Since then, according to analysis by Rhodium Group, Beijing's export quotas have been deliberately opaque, designed to maximize uncertainty among foreign buyers. This isn't deception exactly, it's strategic communication. The goal? Make dependence feel inevitable. Now the other side of the story. In 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense announced plans to restore American rare earth independence, reopening domestic mines, building refineries, reducing Chinese reliance to zero within 10 years. What actually happened? According to U.S. Geological Survey data, American mines did increase ore extraction. Mountain Pass in California, operated by MP Materials, ramped up significantly. But MP Materials' own SEC filings reveal that as of late 2024, the majority of their ore concentrate still ships to China for processing. Their investor presentations cite domestic refining infrastructure under development. Translation: we can dig it up, but we can't yet turn it into anything useful without Chinese facilities. According to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, even with planned expansions, China will control at least 70% of global refining capacity through 2035. The American independence narrative isn't false, it's aspirational. Useful for appropriations committees, great for stock prices, but ahead of supply chain reality. Every Tesla, every wind turbine marketed as clean energy, the future, saving the planet. But corporate sustainability reports have a notable gap: upstream environmental costs. According to research in the Journal of Cleaner Production, producing 1 kilogram of refined neodymium used in EV motors and turbines generates approximately 2,000 liters of acidic wastewater and 1.4 kilograms of radioactive residue. Your Tesla Model 3's 12 kilograms of rare earths required roughly 24,000 liters of toxic wastewater to produce. You won't see that in marketing materials. Corporate reports classify this under Scope 3 emissions, supply chain, a category notorious for incomplete disclosure. The calculation? If someone else created the pollution, we don't emphasize it in our sustainability metrics. Let me show you what selective reporting obscures. Baotou, Inner Mongolia. According to BBC investigative reporting and satellite imagery from NASA's Earth Observatory, it's home to a toxic lake spanning 10 square kilometers, 1,500 football fields of chemical waste from rare earth processing. The BBC interviewed residents in 2015. One farmer described his land. Nothing grows anymore. The crops died years ago. Another spoke of illness clusters, cancer rates, respiratory disease, though establishing causation is complicated by China's limited public health data. The Guardian's reporting from surrounding villages documents similar accounts: contaminated water sources, collapsed agriculture, children with developmental issues. According to Chinese government environmental reports analyzed by international researchers, Baotou accounts for roughly 40% of China's rare earth production. There are similar sites across Inner Mongolia, Jiangxi, Sichuan, and Guangdong, smaller, less documented. This isn't theoretical. These are real communities bearing the environmental cost of materials and devices we use daily. So why doesn't the West build cleaner refining facilities? Some are trying. MP Materials is developing domestic refining capacity in California. Lynas Corporation operates in Australia. The EU has funded several projects, but they face real obstacles. According to Reuters reporting on U.S. refining attempts, every project encounters strict environmental regulations, community opposition, costs 2 to 3 times higher than Chinese operations, and Chinese competitors willing to operate at a loss to maintain market dominance. Building equivalent infrastructure requires an estimated $2 to $5 billion in capital and 5 to 10 years, assuming communities accept the environmental trade-offs. Australian projects face similar challenges. Lynas operates refining in Malaysia precisely because Australian environmental standards made domestic processing prohibitively difficult. Even there, according to local media, Malaysian communities have repeatedly protested waste management practices. The pattern is clear. Extract in countries with strict standards, process where regulations are more flexible. Can't we just recycle rare earths? The technology exists. According to Research in Resources Conservation and Recycling, rare earths can be recovered from electronics and magnets. The problem is economics. Analysis by the Critical Materials Institute shows recycling costs 2 to 3 times more per kilogram than mining new material, when you don't account for environmental cleanup costs, which current Chinese operations largely don't. As of 2024, less than 1% of global rare earth consumption comes from recycled sources, according to the International Energy Agency. The market has decided. When environmental externalities aren't priced in, destruction is cheaper than circularity. Some companies are investing in better recycling technology, Apple's Daisy robot, urban mining startups in Europe, but scale remains elusive. Here's what this actually means for global security. According to Department of Defense assessments, virtually every advanced weapons system, F-35 fighters, missile guidance, satellite communications, depends on rare earth components. A single F-35 contains approximately 417 kilograms. Now imagine a 6-month disruption in Chinese rare earth exports, whether from geopolitical conflict, trade war, or natural disaster. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Western electronics manufacturing would experience critical shortages within 3 to 4 months. Defense production would slow within 6 months. And there's no sufficient strategic reserve. The U.S. maintains reserves of petroleum, helium, even cheese. But rare earths? only weeks of critical defense needs, according to government accountability reports. But the landscape is shifting, slowly. Japan, scarred by the 2010 export restrictions, invested heavily in alternatives. According to research from Tokyo Institute of Technology, Japanese manufacturers have reduced rare earth use in some magnets by 30% through material innovation. The EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, passed in 2023, mandates diversification targets and recycling requirements. Early, but a structural change. Some mining companies are attempting responsible production. MP Materials has committed to zero waste refining in California, though implementation is years away. Canada's Vital Metals is developing processing with Indigenous community partnerships that include environmental oversight. Deep-sea mining for rare earth-rich nodules is being explored, though it presents its own ecological questions. These efforts face enormous economic headwinds, but they represent recognition that the current system is unsustainable. So let's summarize what we've learned. The rare earth industry operates on strategic ambiguity because clarity would be uncomfortable for everyone. China benefits from perceived total control, even when actual control is partial. Western governments can justify spending on independence, even when true independence is years or decades away. Green tech companies can market clean energy, while upstream environmental costs remain underreported. Mining companies can attract investment with optimistic projections, even when economic viability is uncertain. This isn't a conspiracy. It's aligned incentives producing a system where precise numbers are less valuable than strategic narratives. The cost of this ambiguity? Environmental devastation exported to communities with less political power. Supply chain vulnerabilities that could disrupt everything from iPhones to fighter jets. And a green transition built on externalized pollution. So what can actually change this? Individual level. Support companies investing in transparency and recycling. Apple, Fairphone, and others publish supply chain audits. Imperfect, but a start. Demand electronics designed for repair and material recovery. Policy level. Support regulations that require life cycle environmental accounting, not just operational emissions. The EU's approach, mandating diversification and recycling, creates market pressure for change. Technology level. Researchers are developing alternatives, ferrite magnets with reduced rare earth content, improved recycling chemistry, biomining using bacteria. None are ready for scale, but progress is real. The rare earth system won't transform overnight, but understanding how strategic ambiguity works, who benefits, what's obscured, where the real costs fall, that's how you start demanding better. The numbers were always more complicated than headlines suggested. Now you know what they actually mean.